And welcome back, students. As we get into more discussion on methods, we are going to today discuss methods that will return a Boolean value. So remember, Boolean means true or false. So return type being set to Boolean. There's nothing really special about methods that return a value of type Boolean. Because remember, Booleans are a primitive type, just like ints and doubles. All right, so it's really nothing more than we kind of have already seen. Now, a method that returns the value of type Boolean must have a return statement of the form return and then the Boolean expression. Therefore, the invocation is going to typically return either true or it's going to return false. It therefore makes the most sense to use an invocation of the method to control such as things like an if-else statement, a while loop, or anything else that a Boolean expression is allowed. So if we look at an example, let's say we want to add the following to our date third try class. Public Boolean is between int low year and int high year. Well, we can just say return year is greater than low year and year is less than high year, because it's going to either return true or it's going to return false. Then let's consider the following code. Date third try date equals new date third try date.set date 1 2 3001. If date is between 2000 comma 4000, system out a print line the date is between the years 2000 and 4000. Else print that it's not. So the expression date is between 2000 and 4000 is an indication of a method that returns a Boolean value. That is, it returns one of the two values as either true or false. Therefore, it makes sense to use it as a controlling Boolean expression in an if-else statement. The expression year in the definition is between, in this case, is really this.year, and this stands for the calling object. The date in date is between 2000 and 4000. The calling object, of course, is date. Now, our expression from before will return the value. Date.year is greater than low year, and date.year is less than high year. But 2000 and 4000 are plugged in for the parameters low year and high year, respectively. So this expression is really more of equivalent to date.year is greater than 2000, and date.year is less than 4000. Thus, the if-else statement is equivalent to if date.year is greater than 2000 and date.year is less than 4000. So we can print out that it's between the years 2000 and 4000. Otherwise, we can say it's not between the years 2000 and 4000. Thus, the output produced should be the date is between the years 2000 and 4000, because remember our year was 3001. So let's look at another Boolean example. Public Boolean precedes date fourth try other date. And you notice with this one, it's a lot longer. We have year is less than other date.year, or year equals other date.year, and get month is less than other date.get month, or year equals other date.year and month.equals other date.month, and date is less than other date.date. And you might wonder, why does this one have all these other ors in it? Because remember, it has to do with what kind of values are passed into the program. So if they just pass in a year, if they just pass in a month and a year, or if they pass in a month, date, and a year. All right, so that's why you have the three different testings there. So you have to say, hey, if one of these is true, the whole thing has to be true. You don't want to use an and because it'll falsify the whole thing. Now, this method is, of course, included in our day fourth try class, which I'll look at in a minute with you. Now, the return statement in the definition of method precedes might look a little imitating. All right, it was pretty large, if you remember. But if you think about it, it's kind of straightforward. It simply just states that date 1 precedes date 2 will return true, provided one of the following three conditions is satisfied. That date 1.year is less than date 2.year, date 1.year equals date 2.year, and date 1.month comes before, or date 2.month, date 1 and date 2 have the same month and year, and date 1.day is less than date 2.day. Whew, that's a mouthful, isn't it? So with a bit of thought, we can realize then that date 1 precedes date 2 in time precisely when one of these three conditions are satisfied. So it all has to do with what kind of value it's being plugged in for. Because if it's just like, hey, the month and date, we don't really care about those. We want to start by looking at the year. Because if the year is different, well, we can just look at the years. But if the years are the same, well, then we got to look at the month. If the months are the same, then we got to look at the day. All right, so that's the end of the notes there, folks. Let me just quickly pop over to the code just to kind of give you a visualization of that. You can see right here, we have this precedes method right here. So this is our Boolean right here. You can see it says public Boolean rather than like public string, for example, like up here we have our toString method. This one is, of course, just going to say precedes date for try other date Other date, of course, is just a parameter name. It could have said new date or whatever we want to. Reason why we say other date, it's kind of a convention meaning, hey, it's another object of that type. Since it's a date type, other date. Now, of course, then we return all these different types in here that we've already went over. We have year is less than other date that year. Year is equal to it. So then we compare the months. If the month and the year are the same, then we compare the date. All right. And then, of course, that would just return true or false. And then we could use that in our code. Like, hey, it's like if this is like, let's say if this date comes first, we want it to do something in our program. Maybe we want it to print out like happy birthday or something. We could do that. It just really depends on what we want to use this for. But it's a Boolean, so it's going to return true or false. There's nothing really super fancy about it other than that's the purpose of this code. All right. With that being said, it wouldn't be that hard to write something that might say, hey, if this is a precedes, what's if it comes afterwards? Well, you could use this kind of thing to write maybe if the date comes after another date. You could flip it around. You can, of course, write any kind of Boolean. If you just want to see if the Boolean, you can say if it is in, like, let's say a range of years. So let's say it's between the year 2000 and 3000, or you just want to see if it's in that range. You could test that as well and still have it return true or false. It just depends on how you set up your Boolean expression. In this case, though, we're just using the precedes to just simply test if one is another. So you could, of course, call this a different name if you didn't want it to be precedes, and if you still want it to be the same thing. It's just the name of it. Not set in stone there, but it's a good name because it makes sense. Because remember, with your Booleans, you want them to kind of be representative of the true value. All right, and that's all I have to say for this lesson, folks. So I will see you next time.